house on Hollow Road looked abandoned in the way old places do when they have not yet decided to fall apart. The windows were dark. The porch leaned slightly to one side. Dead vines crawled across the bricks. It stood alone at the end of a gravel lane, hidden behind thin trees that barely moved in the wind. I almost kept driving. Then I saw a light in the upstairs window. It was weak and pale, like someone standing behind a curtain with a candle. I slowed the car and watched. A few seconds later, the light disappeared. I had come to Rowan because of a phone call. My older brother, Daniel, had not spoken to me in 6 years. Then, 3 nights ago, he called without warning. He said only one sentence before the line went dead. "Don't let them keep the house." Every time I called back, his phone went straight to voicemail. Our father had died in Rowan. The old family house still belonged to us. I told myself I was only here to settle paperwork and finally sell the place. But deep down, I knew that wasn't why I came. Daniel had sounded afraid, and Daniel was never afraid. Rain began falling as I drove into town. The streets were almost empty. A few old buildings stood under dim streetlights, their windows dark, as if the whole town had gone to sleep hours ago. Nothing looked welcoming. Even the silence felt heavy. I checked into a small roadside motel that smelled of old coffee and damp carpet. The woman at the front desk looked at my driver's license, then quietly looked back at me. "You're here for the Mercer house," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm just visiting," I replied. She didn't believe me. "Don't go there after dark." I waited for an explanation. None came. "Why not?" She slowly pushed the room key across the counter. "Because the house likes people who stay too long." She wasn't smiling. Neither was I. Inside my room, I tried calling Daniel again. No answer. I left another voicemail, telling him I had arrived and asking where he was. The room was silent after I hung up. Then I heard something outside my door. A slow scraping sound, like someone dragging the bottom of a shoe across the hallway carpet. It stopped. A moment later, there was a single soft knock. Not loud, not urgent, just one gentle tap. I walked toward the door but didn't open it. Then a man's voice spoke from the hallway. Quiet, calm, almost familiar. He said my name, and somehow he sounded exactly like my brother. I froze. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. "Daniel?" No answer. I unlocked the door and pulled it open. The hallway was empty. A single yellow light buzzed above the worn carpet. The rain tapped softly against the window at the end of the hall. Every door was closed. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. I stepped into the hallway anyway. "Daniel?" My voice sounded too loud. No footsteps. No reply. Just the hum of the old light. As I turned back toward my room, something caught my eye. An envelope rested against my door. It hadn't been there a minute earlier. There was no stamp, no address, only my name, written in neat black ink. Inside was a single folded page, 3 words: "Leave before Sunday." That was all. No signature, no explanation. I walked straight to the front desk. The woman looked up before I spoke. "You heard someone," she said. It wasn't a question. I placed the note on the counter. "Who left this?" She read it without touching it. Her expression didn't change. "You should listen." "Listen to who?" "To whoever still wants you alive." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. What does that mean? She looked toward the rain-covered window instead of answering. "People come back for that house," she said quietly. "Most of them believe they're here to sell it. Some think they're here because of family." She paused. "They're always wrong." I waited for more. She simply slid the note back toward me. "Go to sleep," she said. "Tomorrow we'll answer one question." "And what question is that?" She met my eyes for the first time. "Whether your brother wanted to save you, or warn you." I barely slept. Every creak in the building pulled me awake. Just before sunrise, I gave up and drove to the Mercer house. Morning made it look less threatening, but not less strange. The front gate stood open. I was certain it had been closed the night before. The yard was overgrown, yet a narrow path through the wet grass looked freshly used. Someone had walked here recently. The front door wasn't locked. It opened with a long wooden groan. The air inside smelled of dust, damp wood, and something older. Not decay. More like a room that had been sealed for years. Furniture sat exactly where my father had left it. A coat still hung beside the door. A clock rested on the wall. Its hands had stopped at 7:16. I remembered that clock. My father wound it every Sunday without fail. Seeing it frozen felt wrong. Like time itself had decided not to move forward. Then I noticed something that shouldn't have been there. Fresh mud. A trail of wet footprints crossed the hallway. They were too clear to be old, too large to be mine. They led toward the staircase, but none of them came back down. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, staring at the footprints. The mud was still wet. Whoever had walked through the house hadn't done it days ago. It had been recent, maybe even this morning. I looked toward the open front door. Part of me wanted to leave, call the police, and let someone else deal with it. But another thought kept pushing back. What if it was Daniel? I started climbing. Each step answered with a slow creak that echoed through the empty house. The air grew colder as I reached the second floor. The smell of damp wood was stronger here, mixed with the faint scent of cigarette smoke. Daniel used to smoke. The hallway was exactly as I remembered it. My old bedroom, my parents' room, the small bathroom, and at the very end, the attic door. It was open, just a few inches. I was sure it had been locked the last time I was here. I pushed it wider. The attic was almost empty. Sunlight slipped through a cracked window, filling the room with floating dust. There were old trunks, broken chairs, and stacks of boxes covered with faded blankets. No one was there. I let out a slow breath. Then I heard it. A quiet thump. Not above me. Below. From inside the floor. I frowned and looked down. The sound came again. One dull knock. Then another. Almost rhythmic. I moved aside an old rug. The wooden floor beneath it looked different from the rest. The boards were newer, their color slightly lighter. Someone had replaced them, years ago, or maybe recently. I knelt and ran my hand across the wood. A thin gap caught my fingers. There was a hidden hatch. After a few hard pulls, it finally lifted open. A narrow space lay beneath the attic floor. Inside sat a metal box coated in dust. No lock, just a rusted latch. I opened it. There were dozens of photographs. Most showed our family. Birthdays, Christmas mornings, summer afternoons in the backyard. But something was wrong. In every picture, one person had been scratched out, not torn away. Carefully scraped from the photographs with something sharp. The same person, Daniel. Every single image had erased him. My hands began to shake. At the bottom of the box was a small cassette recorder, old enough that I wondered if it still worked. A strip of masking tape covered the front. One sentence had been written across it. If you're hearing this, Daniel was right. Before I could press play, a loud slam echoed through the house. The front door. Someone had just come inside. Slow footsteps crossed the hallway below. They didn't hesitate. They were coming straight for the stairs. The footsteps climbed slowly, not hurried, not cautious. Whoever it was knew the house well. I slipped the cassette recorder into my jacket and quietly lowered the attic hatch. The old rug barely covered the outline, but it was the best I could do. The footsteps reached the second floor. Then they stopped. Silence settled over the hallway. A floorboard creaked just outside the attic door. I held my breath. A shadow stretched across the floor. Someone was standing there. Seconds passed. Then, without a word, the footsteps moved away. One by one, calm and hurried. I counted until I could no longer hear them. Only then did I step into the hallway. It was empty. I hurried downstairs. The front door was wide open again, swaying gently in the wind. No car, no voice, no sign that anyone had been there. Except for one thing. A fresh set of muddy footprints led into the living room. I followed them. They ended in front of the fireplace. Nowhere else. No footprints leaving. No hidden door that I could see. Just a cold stone fireplace that hadn't been used in years. Something was tucked between two loose bricks. It was a folded newspaper. The date caught my eye immediately. October 18th, 6 years earlier. The day after my father's funeral. Across the front page was a headline about a local man who had disappeared without a trace. The name made my stomach tighten. Daniel Mercer. I read it again. It claimed my brother had gone missing the morning after the funeral. Police believed he had left Rowan voluntarily. The investigation had gone cold within weeks. That couldn't be right. 3 nights ago, Daniel had called me. I had heard his voice. I knew I had. My phone buzzed in my pocket. An unknown number. I answered immediately. For a few seconds, there was only static. Then a whisper. Don't play the tape in the house. The line went dead. I stared at the screen. No number. No caller ID. Nothing. Before I could think, I heard an engine outside. An old sheriff's truck rolled into the driveway. A tall man stepped out, removed his hat, and looked at the house with an expression that wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. When he reached the porch, he didn't ask who I was. He already knew. You look just like your father, he said quietly. Then his eyes settled on the bulge inside my jacket where the cassette recorder was hidden. His face lost what little color it had. Tell me, he said. You didn't find a tape up there, did you? I didn't answer right away. The sheriff kept watching me. His eyes never left my jacket. You found it, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. My hand rested over the recorder without thinking. Who are you? I asked. He sighed. Sheriff Tom Harlan. He glanced at the house before looking back at me. I've been hoping that tape would never be found. Something about the way he said it made me take a step back. You knew my father. I knew your whole family. Then tell me where Daniel is. The sheriff was silent for a long moment. I wish I could. That answer only made me angrier. He called me 3 nights ago. The sheriff's expression didn't change. No, he said. You believe someone called you. A cold breeze swept through the open doorway. Rain clouds were gathering again. I pulled out my phone and showed him the call log. There, the incoming call was gone. I stared at the screen. I knew I hadn't deleted it. The voicemail I had left Daniel the night before had disappeared too. Every trace of our calls was missing. That's impossible, I whispered. The sheriff looked as if he had seen this before. It always starts that way. I frowned. What starts? The house. Before I could ask another question, an elderly woman crossed the road toward us, carrying a small paper bag. She stopped the moment she saw me. For a second, she looked genuinely frightened. You shouldn't have come back, she whispered. I've never met you. No, she said softly, but I held you the day you were born. She introduced herself as Evelyn Cross. She had lived across the road from the Mercer house for over 40 years. Without another word, she reached into the bag and handed me a faded photograph. It showed 6 people standing on this very porch. My father, my mother, Daniel, me, Sheriff Harlan, and Evelyn. I turned the picture over. A date was written in blue ink. October 17th, 6 years ago, the day of my father's funeral. I don't understand, I said. We never took this picture. Evelyn looked at me with tired eyes. That's because you don't remember. A chill ran through me. What don't I remember? Neither of them answered. Instead, Evelyn pointed toward the second floor window. I followed her finger. Someone was standing behind the curtain, watching us. The figure looked too tall to be Daniel, too still to be anyone alive. Then the curtain slowly closed by itself. None of us moved. The curtain settled into place. The upstairs window was empty again. Sheriff Harlan took a slow step back from the porch. You saw it, I said. I saw the curtain. You know someone was standing there. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned to Evelyn. You shouldn't have brought him the photograph. He deserved to know, she replied. No, the sheriff said. Not yet. I looked from one of them to the other. What happened here 6 years ago? Evelyn lowered her eyes. The truth doesn't come all at once. I was done waiting. I pushed past them and walked back into the house. The sheriff called after me. If you're going to play that tape, don't do it in there. I ignored him. Outside, the rain had started again. Inside, the house felt strangely quiet, almost as if it were listening. I walked into the kitchen. The cassette recorder was old, but I found a box of batteries in one of the drawers. My father kept spare batteries for everything. To my surprise, they still worked. The recorder clicked. The tape began to spin. A burst of static filled the room. Then a man's voice. My father's. If you're hearing this, something has gone terribly wrong. My heart pounded. I don't know how much you'll remember. Maybe nothing. That's probably for the best. The recording crackled. If Daniel brought you back, then he couldn't stop it alone. My father paused, as if searching for the right words. The house isn't haunted. Another burst of static. It's hiding something. The tape suddenly stopped. Not at the end. It simply cut off. I pressed play again. Nothing. I rewound it. Still nothing. The rest of the tape was silent. Then I heard a soft click behind me. I turned. The kitchen door, which I was certain had been open, was now closed. A faint smell drifted through the room. Fresh coffee. I hadn't made any. The smell pulled at an old memory. Sunday mornings. My father reading the newspaper. Daniel laughing at something I couldn't remember. For one impossible moment, the house didn't feel abandoned. It felt lived in. Then came another sound. A chair scraped across the dining room floor. Slowly, deliberately, I stepped into the doorway. One chair had moved away from the table. No one was there. On the table lay a folded sheet of paper. It hadn't been there a moment earlier. My name was written across the front. This time, I recognized the handwriting. It was Daniel's. Inside was a single sentence. If you remember October 17th, don't trust your own memory. I read the note 3 times. The handwriting was unmistakable. Daniel always crossed his 7s with a short line through the middle. He said it made them harder to change. No one else wrote like that. I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket. The date wouldn't leave my mind. October 17th, the day of our father's funeral. Why couldn't I remember anything after the service? I could picture the church, the rain, the black umbrellas, the smell of wet flowers. Then, nothing. It was as if someone had cut the rest of the day out of my life. I left the house before sunset and drove straight to the town library. It was nearly empty. An older man sat behind the front desk, reading a worn paperback. When I asked for old newspapers and public records, he looked at my last name and quietly stood up. "I was wondering when one of you would come back," he said. He led me into a small archive room filled with dusty filing cabinets. Most of the records about the Mercer house had disappeared. Pages had been torn from folders. Entire files were missing. Only one box remained untouched. Inside were police reports, property records, and a faded notebook labeled interview statements. One statement caught my attention immediately. It belonged to Evelyn. The boys kept saying there was someone else in the house. We searched every room. No one was there. They both insisted they could hear him walking upstairs. The interview was dated October 18th, the day after the funeral. I turned the page. Another statement, Sheriff Harlan. Neither brother agrees on what happened after 7:16 p.m. One says they never entered the attic. The other says they never came back down. I stopped reading. That made no sense. How could both statements exist? A folded piece of paper slipped from the notebook. It wasn't an official record. It was a child's drawing. Two boys stood outside the Mercer house, holding hands. In the upstairs window was a tall black figure with no face. Across the bottom, written in uneven pencil, were 5 words. "He remembers when we forget." A chill spread through me. I suddenly remembered drawing pictures like this as a child. Not because I was scared, because someone had told me to. The librarian appeared in the doorway. "You found it. What is this drawing?" He hesitated. "Your brother made dozens of them." My pulse quickened. "Daniel?" The librarian nodded. He said it was the only way he'd remember the man upstairs. I stared at him. The man upstairs wasn't real. The librarian looked at me with genuine pity. "That's exactly what your father wanted everyone to believe." Before I could ask another question, every light in the archive flickered. Once, twice, then they went out. In the darkness, I heard footsteps. Not in the hallway, not outside, inside the archive room. Someone had walked in, but the only door was directly in front of me, and the librarian was still standing in it. The room fell silent. Neither of us moved. A few seconds later, the emergency lights flickered on, bathing the archive in a dim red glow. The footsteps had stopped. The librarian switched on his flashlight. Its beam swept across the shelves. Dust drifted through the air. Every cabinet was closed. Every chair was empty. "There was someone in here," I whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he pointed toward the far wall. A filing cabinet stood open. It had been closed moments earlier. Inside was a single folder. Every other file was gone. Across the front, in faded black letters, were 2 words. Mercer House. I opened it. The first page wasn't a police report. It was a medical evaluation. Patient, Daniel Mercer. The report claimed Daniel suffered from recurring false memories and severe confusion after our father's funeral. The final recommendation caught my eye. Patient should not return to the Mercer property under any circumstances. I turned the page. Another evaluation. This one had my name. The same diagnosis. The same warning. The date made my stomach tighten. 3 days after the funeral. I had no memory of it. "Who ordered these?" I asked. The librarian took the folder and pointed to the signature. "Sheriff Tom Harlan. He told everyone you boys had suffered trauma." The librarian said quietly. "Most people believed him. And you didn't." He shook his head. "I knew your father." "Then tell me the truth." Before he could answer, something slipped from the folder. A cassette tape. It looked almost identical to the one from the attic. Only the writing was different. In my father's handwriting were the words, "Play this only after you remember." The lights suddenly came back on. The archive looked normal again. The filing cabinet was closed. The folder had vanished. Only the cassette remained. The librarian stared at the empty shelf. "I didn't touch it," he whispered. "Neither had I. I left before dark. At my car, I found a folded note tucked beneath the windshield wiper. No envelope, no name, just one message. He knows you found the second tape." I looked around. The street was empty. Rain began falling again. As I got into the driver's seat, my phone rang. A known number. I answered without speaking, only breathing. Then Daniel's voice, clearer than ever. "If Sheriff Harlan asks you to remember." His voice dissolved into static, then returned. "Do the opposite." The call ended. Before I could react, headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. Sheriff Harlan's truck was parked across the street. It hadn't been there a moment earlier. He stepped to my window. His face was calm, almost relieved. "I've been looking for you," he said. Then his eyes fell on the cassette on the passenger seat. His expression changed. "You found the second one." He leaned closer. "Now we don't have much time." Sheriff Harlan didn't wait for me to answer. He opened the passenger door, picked up the cassette, and turned it over in his hands. For the first time since I had met him, he looked frightened. You don't understand what this is, he said. Then explain it. He looked across the empty street before speaking. Not here. Against my better judgment, I followed his truck to the old sheriff's office at the edge of town. The building had been closed for years. Dust covered the windows, and weeds pushed through the cracked parking lot. Inside, the air smelled of paper and mildew. Harlan unlocked a steel cabinet in the back room. It held dozens of tape recorders. Every one of them was labeled with a date. Every date was October 17th. What is this? I asked. They're memories. I stared at him. He gave a tired smile. I know how that sounds. He pulled out one recorder and pressed play. A woman's voice filled the room. She was crying. I can't remember his face anymore, she whispered. He was standing upstairs. I know he was, but every morning, I remember a little less. The recording ended. Harlan picked up another. A man's voice this time. If anyone finds this, don't sleep in the Mercer house. That's when it changes you. Click. Silence. Who are these people? I asked. Everyone who tried to tell the truth. My chest tightened. You've been collecting them. I've been protecting them. Before I could respond, the office lights flickered. Not once. Again and again. The old tape recorders clicked at the same time, one after another. Then every recorder began to play. Different voices, different years, all speaking over each other. He was watching. Don't look upstairs. We forgot again. He isn't in the house. He's under it. The last sentence cut through the noise. I looked at Harlan. He had heard it too. Slowly, he reached into his pocket and removed a folded map of the Mercer property. His finger stopped beneath the house. There used to be a storm cellar here, he said quietly. It was sealed the week after your father's funeral. Why? He swallowed. Because that's where they found you. My blood ran cold. They found both of us. Harlan looked away. No, he met my eyes. They found only you. The room became impossibly quiet. But Daniel. Harlan's voice barely rose above a whisper. Daniel was already gone before anyone opened that cellar. At that exact moment, the second cassette on the desk clicked by itself. No one touched it. My father's voice filled the room. If this tape has started on its own. A long burst of static followed. He finally remembers where Daniel is. Static swallowed the room. My father's voice vanished for several seconds before returning. If you're hearing this now, you remembered enough. The tape crackled. I never wanted either of you to carry what happened beneath this house. The recording stopped, not because it had ended. Someone had pressed stop. None of us had moved. The button on the recorder was down. Harlan slowly stepped back. We have to go, he whispered. Minutes later we reached the Mercer house. Night had fallen over Roland. Rain turned the yard into black mud. Behind the house, beneath thick weeds, we found a rusted metal ring. The storm cellar. Harlan pulled it open. Cold air rushed out. Not stale air. Fresh air. As though something below had been breathing. A narrow staircase vanished into darkness. My flashlight revealed damp concrete walls. Water dripped somewhere ahead. At the bottom sat a small room. An old chair. A broken lantern. Another tape recorder. Beside it lay a child's drawing. Two boys. One house. No figure in the upstairs window. Only an arrow pointing underground. My hands shook as I pressed play. Daniel's voice filled the cellar. If you're listening, you finally made it back. He sounded older. Calmer. I wasn't trapped in the house. I stayed because I knew what would happen if I left. I looked at Harlan. His face had gone pale. The house doesn't keep people, Daniel continued. It keeps the truth. You've spent 6 years believing I disappeared. You didn't. You watched me stay. The memories came all at once. The funeral. The argument. Daniel opening the cellar. Our father trying to stop him. The frightened crowd outside. Then, my father kneeling before me. His hands on my shoulders. Forget this, he kept saying. Forget all of it. Tears filled my eyes. I remembered. I whispered. Harlan nodded. Your father asked us to protect you. He believed forgetting was kinder than living with the truth. But Daniel refused. The tape reached its end. If you remember me, Daniel said softly, don't look for me. I'm exactly where I chose to be. The recorder clicked off. Silence settled over the cellar. Then I noticed fresh footprints. Not ours. They crossed the wet floor and ended at the far wall. No doorway. No tunnel. Only old concrete. I raised my flashlight. Scratched into the wall were words in the same handwriting as every note I'd found. You remembered? Now don't make them forget again. Years have passed since that night. The Mercer house still stands at the end of Hollow Road. Empty. Quiet. Waiting. People still ask why it was never demolished. The town always gives the same answer. Because there's nothing dangerous inside. Sometimes, late at night, I almost believe them. Then I remember what no one else in Rowan seems able to recall. When we opened the storm cellar, there was only one set of footprints leading in, and only one set leading back out.